All right, welcome back, and many thanks to Stephen Mbide for the update on the traffic around the precincts of Parliament, but also on the situation there as the country awaits today's events. Highly anticipated, very controversial, but also something that could define the country's political trajectory. The UPDF Amendment Act, the debate, as well as the vote on the same that is expected to happen later today. On our Kickstarter program this morning, we are looking at the contending views of militarization and democracy in Uganda as we explore the overlap between military as well as political leadership. Now, that on its own is a contestation. Should you be led by a soldier, or are you more comfortable when the civilians are at the helm of government? For those who have a good reading of Uganda's history and may be old enough to have experienced all forms of government under civilians, under the military, and commissions that have military men and civilians on them as governing at any one moment in time, could have far-reaching perspective on this particular issue. But to help us understand what is no doubt a very complex aspect of politics and governance, I have with me the Honourable Basil Bataringaya, the MP for Kashari North. Many thanks for joining us this morning, Honourable.
Thank you.
I'm also joined by Dr. Tolit Atiya. He is a scholar and a security analyst. Many thanks for making time again.
Thank you very much, and good morning, viewers.
Gentlemen, militarization and democracy being looked at, in some circles, one could say they can't do without each other. Some will contend that the military is one that can help entrench democracy, but others will say democracy can survive and can flourish even when the soldiers are not with us. Before we get into what is no doubt a very large scope of debate, the events in the run-up to what's going to be happening today, of course, that should be able to offer us a bit of context in this debate, is something that has politicians, observers, including in the media, holding their breath on what is going to be, what will be happening. I just want to, let me begin with the Honourable and Dr. Tolit Atiya. For purposes, you've been with us here before. Honourable rarely comes around morning at NTV. Yes. What do you make of the fact that we are in this position again, where we have to legislate ourselves either out of or into a different dispensation altogether? What's your take on these events?
Thank you very much, our moderator this morning. So once again to the viewers, my name is Bataringaya Basil Rwankwene, Member of Parliament Kashari North. I entered Parliament on NRM ticket, and in the Parliament I'm also the NRM whip for Ankole sub-region. Okay. And at the same time, the chairperson, Ankole Parliamentary Caucus. So I hold those two positions. Now, today, Parliament will be discussing a very strong bill, which some people have dubbed controversial, but to some extent, controversy is in the minds of the people. The UPDF Act that is being amended is the UPDF has run on this act, except that there are certain things that are being fine-tuned in this act. Now, the act is intended to deal with three major things. One, to make sure that discipline in the army and also in the use of guns is maintained in this country. If you recall, in USA, people are free to own guns. You apply and have. I think also in this country there are some people, civilians who have guns.
Own guns if you have a license.
Yes, who own guns through a license. Now, we have seen in the US where the best democracy, some people with guns walk into classrooms, walk into crowded societies and shoot people at random. Now, two things. We know also in the UPDF, there are some times when soldiers, as an individual, in his own character, sometimes get surrounded. If, for example, quarrel of a woman, quarrel in a bar, somebody loses his temper and also shoots people. So the soldier is tried according to the UPDF Act. However, he can appear in a civilian court. As of now, civilian courts are already overcrowded. So what are we talking about in this law? One, discipline of these people who have the gun. If you have the gun, you must be disciplined because it is an instrument to kill. But two, once you are also a civilian and you have applied for a gun, you have voluntarily gone for it. It is, why are you looking for the gun? One, the first one is to protect yourself. But also, in the course of protecting yourself, you can also use it to kill the other person that is.
You could use it irresponsibly.
Yes. Now, no, you could use it responsibly, but also irresponsibly. So if you kill as a self-defense, you are protecting yourself. But you could use it irresponsibly and kill somebody. Now, since you have voluntarily gone for the gun, why shouldn't you voluntarily be disciplined like the other people who have the gun? Thirdly, so let me stop at those 2 points at the moment, because two things: if you hold the gun, be disciplined, because if you are not disciplined, you can cause harm to society.
All right.
But also two, since you have voluntarily gone for it, then be ready to go where those who hold the gun go.
Interesting submission there, Honorable Basil Bataringaya. Dr. Atiya, I want to understand the premise of the Uganda People's Defense Forces Amendment Act 2005. Is it an issue of discipline? Is it something of rectifying administrative loopholes within the force? Very recently, we had what was described as the UPDF book, one that was able to reconstitute command and gave powers to the commander of formerly Army Commander, now Chief of Defense Forces, to even make appointments, something that wasn't done before. What was missed within the UPDF book that it became very apparent, especially after the Supreme Court ruling that nullified the mandate of the court-martial to try civilians? Why was it seen at that time that the UPDF book had missed all these things?
Thanks very much, Igenye. In trying to find context with this bill, and which is usual, if you're looking at a particular bill which is intended, you know, to then become law, usually the starting point is to basically look at the objectives of the bill, because that is what the sponsors of the bill are required to be able to bring forth in that particular document. If you look at this particular bill, the objectives in the bill are quite telling. There are three things in this bill which are fairly interesting. One is that the very first 2 or 3 objectives talk about the issue of veterans. 2, they talk about the issue, the welfare of veterans generally. And then the other object talks about improving medical services. And they go on and on. That is the bill. Then the bill has proposed amendment to 80 articles. 80. 1, 2, 80.
Yes.
Which is quite quite dragging, you know. I had an opportunity to watch clips of the committee looking at the bill. At some point, I actually had the chairman congratulate his team because they had managed to negotiate a little time forward, you know, to consider the bill. Because also then the other characteristic that comes with this particular bill is that it is being pushed at a supersonic speed. Now, having seen that, you would then ask, what is the intention in this bill when you're trying to get the context? This bill is coming at the heel of a number of political contestations. In the last, I think, 3 years or so, actively, especially with the emergence of the National Unity Party, NUP, and their characteristic, what would you call it, their characteristic
red overalls. And,
red overalls and the berets, and which basically attracted attention of the sitting government. And initially what is interesting is that from a political perspective, they actually tried to ape, because now you go on the streets and you can see yellow berets, you know. And then of course we know that out of this then came the rejection of this this kind of political characterization of NUP. They have the very first one. I think we had sections of the UPDF Act. I think even before the Act, the UPDF went ahead and gazetted certain attire and classified them as military. So the berets, and then I think what related to some of what NUP uses as their wear and paraphernalia were were disallowed. And they've continued to wear these things. So there is a political contestation, and there is a history to that. We also know that because of their defiance, we have had a number of NUP, which is largely supported by very young people and militaristic in nature, if you like. I don't know whether militaristic or charisma. I think the word is not militaristic, but the charisma and energy, the kind of that they display. We've had many of them charged with the offense of being in possession of military stores, and it is on record, at least from what we have seen in the media, that many have stayed in prison and languished there, especially in the hands of the military court. So there is an issue in that. Of course, then the most recent to this issue is the arrest, the picking of Besigye and his colleague Obed, brought into the country. But before that, I think there was a group of youth who were also picked up from, I think, a conference in Nairobi. So this sort of gives you an interesting context. And this is in the very near, what you'd call, all these have been occurrences in the most near future. But it's not that in the past we have not had situations like this. We know that even in the past regimes. So the issue here is the question of this legislation. Those who have read and tried to unpack it seem to suggest that it looks like everything else, the push for the welfare of the veterans, which is an important thing in an army, because the hallmark of an army is seen on how it caters for its veterans.
That is right.
The hallmark of an army is seen on how its medical services. Actually, world over, military medical hospitals are actually centers of excellence. This is where a lot of
government officials
and even scientific breakthroughs are done. This would definitely be a welcome idea, but in all these razzmatazz seems to be packed like a rose flower. At the edges, there are these very lethal pricking thorns, which seem to be aiming for the heart of the the heart of the wheels of a democracy, which is basically the protection of human rights. So the whole debate has sort of shifted away from all the rest and has moved to the protection of liberties, the question of liberties, speech and liberty. That is what seems to be under attack.
Perfectly understandable, and I also do observe that, for example, to debate the quality of science and research that is undertaken in military medical facilities is not something that we have interested ourselves in. This is on account of what appears to be the more thorny aspects of why civilians should return to the military court system, which of course is going to have a new name. But in light of the statement you said earlier, and you made comparisons to the United States, where incidents of shooters, they love to describe them as shooters. They would describe them very conveniently as terrorists if they were in a different context. It has happened often, but we've not seen these shooters tried by the US military. They are effectively tried within the civil and civilian courts in that country. Why would you want to compare the context when it comes to the actions of the shooters, but not the dispensation of justice when they are brought before the law? Why is it convenient for you to play that card a different way?
You see, NRM has been in charge now for about 40 years.
It's coming to 40.
40 years. But even before the 40 years, the leadership of the NRM were engaged in military, I will call them adventures, in which one of the key aspects was discipline. Here in the country, during after independence up to when the NRM took over power, there were excesses carried out here, including the judiciary being overturned to the extent that the Chief Justice was abducted and killed. Those who know history, Ben Chwanka was taken out of court and killed. The NRM, the NRA, started on this, while one in the bush, and when they came in, the objective was to restore sanity and security. In this process, judiciary actually was eventually restored, and civilian courts are operating very smoothly. However, they are overcrowded. If you know, those who follow, you know, it's because this thing is a bit politicized now. But we have got people who, in civilian courts, for example, land issues, let me use land issues, which are taking 30 years, and people even die before they access their monies. Now, the UPDF has been known to act very fast, try, and then. But the ones who are tried, including the army officers themselves, are free to go into, to appear into the civilian courts. I think you are aware about that. So now what happens is, one, as we talk now, you see, because you have asked me about the shooters, and in the US, they are tried by the civilian courts. Remember, the USA has gone through a democratic process for over 200 years. Here, we are trying, if you went and read their history, I'm very sure some of these things, you will see that they have gone through these processes also, like the ones we are going through today. The problem is that we want to quickly run.
I'm afraid, Honorable,
yes,
I'm going to have to halt you in your tracks there, and I'm trying to follow you very well and understand your point of view. You seem to suggest, for example, that the speed at which justice is dispensed within the civilian courts is one that is a disservice to the people, and that the military is more swift, and that is why you justify the military taking over.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
You just talked about the fact that cases are not moving in the civilian courts.
Yes, I gave that as an example. Remember, this is about people's lives. The land case I've talked about is something that is not about your life. It is about your welfare. But this one, somebody has picked a gun and killed. People want justice.
But honorable, in land there is life.
Yes, yeah, I know it is there. It is there. But so what I'm putting across here is, if you, because we put it very clear, if you have gone for the gun voluntarily, why do you want to run away from being tried by the court? And yet you still have the chance to appeal. But let me use the example of the Karamajong, the Karachunas. These people were in kraals, they hide in kraals, they shoot the enemy. When they are arrested, of course, during the arrest, there are things that we do not accept also. when you go to arrest, you arrest all the old women or the young boys, and then you dump them in prison. But there is a process of sieving out who is the criminal.
But Honorable,
now,
that happened
just
in
a minute.
Karamoja.
Yes, it happened in Karamoja.
And what was done about? What has been done about it up
yes,
to now?
The Karachunas.
No. The human rights violations, and they're documented, by the way.
Yes. No, before let me just keep the context here within where exactly the discussion that we are holding here.
Finish it.
Yeah.
These Karamojong are held, but if you went to Karamoja now, there is some level of pacification. Although these people are being held and under trial and under induction to come back into society, because this has been discussed even with the Karamoja caucus and what have you, to make sure that the people, when they come back to society, they come back harmonious. But if you just let them back into society, they will carry out the same activities. So this is why, if you are holding a gun, even me I accept, I have capacity to own a gun. But when my security is not threatened, why should I look for it?
Then when it is threatened?
When you look for it.
And then at that point, you have the conviction that my security is threatened, and I'm now willing, if in the conduct of self-defense,
but remember,
appear before a court martial.
It may be threatened because of your bad acts, your own bad acts.
Honorable, just a moment. Dr. Atiya, do you understand the Honorable?
Yeah, well, I do understand the Honorable very well, and I'm happy he's come.
Because I'm failing to get to terms with the fact that he says the end justifies the means.
You see, I am happy, Higenyi, that the Honorable has come out the way he has, because this speaks volumes.
Okay.
This tells us that this actually confirms to us the suspicion we've had about this parliament. That this parliament is not...
no, these are my opinions, not of parliament, because we have not even discussed.
You as a member of parliament.
Yes.
it gives us this gives us an inkling of what we are going to see in parliament today. You know, this bill, by the way, and I am not afraid of any contradiction. This bill is going to sail through without much debate, without any rigorous scrutiny. This bill has been on sale to Parliament for a long time, and it has already been sold. Why? And the problem is, I mean, Parliament goes through...
It is not sold to us.
It is sold.
We have been discussing it at different levels.
No, you see,
so it is not being sold.
You were asked.
Yes.
You were asked to try and... you are an NRM member of Parliament.
Yes.
You've had caucuses to discuss this bill that would expect you to put the merits of this bill very succinctly. But what I can see, you have simply fallen into the trappings. And by the way, let me first say this again. It is a pity that many people do not know that even governments can be wrong, just like human beings can be wrong. You know, the state can be wrong. The state can get a context wrong. And in this particular one, it has got it all wrong. It has sold it because Parliament has bought it wholesale. At least if the indications of the member of Parliament are anything to go by. They don't seem to see, because the argument, look, he says, he's talking about discipline. That is one. The examples he is giving to try and augment this discipline. Because honestly, look, the people who hold guns, like the people we are talking about, how many are they, you know, in our population? Because even
with insecurity around Uganda, the Congo.
No,
there are many.
But that insecurity in the Congo, the insecurity in Sudan, yes, has an impact on our security posture.
Yes.
But the response then is not internal legislation on limiting or limiting per se, or increasing stewardship on the question of managing guns in the hands of civilians.
Let me just ask you a simple
This thing is a complete...
Let him ask,
okay,
you,
ask
you the question, Honorable.
We have had sometimes that people who attacked, both by the opposition, both by the people in the government, that people who came into an area, either robbed or killed or did what, were in either police or military uniform. Now, the people, what they saw was police or military uniform. Now, why should you, as a civilian, for example, put on clothes that are of a given discipline? If today, when I walked inside here, you are now putting on a necktie, I didn't know you very well. Of course, I know you because you are a common person on TV. But if I came in now and I found you in a bishop's gown, seated there, and you are going to ask me questions, what would go on in my mind today? So, if you are putting on, because I'm answering the question earlier of military, of the berets and the uniforms. Why should somebody put on this? What is your intention? Isn't it to confuse society and posture yourself in an area where you don't belong? So when you confuse society, what do you eventually achieve? And therefore, when your objective goes wrong, where should you be taken for trial?
Intention. I love the employ of that word.
Yes.
Are you suggesting, for example...
You are here as a bishop.
Are you suggesting that when NRM supporters put on overalls and yellow berets...
Exactly, they should also be arrested.
How many have been arrested so far?
No, they should be arrested.
How many have been arrested so far?
That is our contention. It should be, no belt should be allowed. That is my, you remember I told you, I am here speaking as
Basil
MP Kashari North. I will never put on that belt, and anybody who is putting it on should be arrested because he's confusing society.
So what is your word to the Uganda police and the security forces that do not arrest NRM supporters who put on military
They are not
fatigues?
doing their job. Simple. They are not doing their job, and they should do it.
Do you think and do you intend to debate that case today?
Yes.
We'll be looking out for you. Dr. Atiya, this debate is one that, of course, has its own fangs, and if you're not very, very careful, you might fail on contextualizing it. But in light of the broader aspect, is this an entrenchment of military rule ahead of civilian governance? Do you see this as the next step into militarization proper? Or is this legislation as we should look at it?
You see, you asked an interesting question, quite loaded. But I hope in what I'm going to try to say, I'll be able to to address myself to some of the issues you raise. The question of militarization, of course, per se, in its very conceptual sense, I think it's something that we have gone past in the conceptual sense, because Uganda has had, I think this election coming is almost the 6th election or so. So we've had democratic circles going on. Of course, what is interesting is, like, when we started this show, remember we were being given a brief of the traffic and the deployment on the streets.
That's right.
Yeah. You know, there is a very interesting mantra in the political sciences which says sometimes to unveil a person or something, you probably need to see it by the way it behaves. And they argue that, you see, if something walks like a duck, then it is a duck.
Probably
if it quacks like a duck, then probably it is a duck. So I find myself, I find this very conflicting, because on one hand, yes, you begin to see features of militarization in our democracy. Because why, I mean, this parliament, it's the business of parliament to sit and ensure that laws are passed, and these are things the honorable member of parliament can attest to. Yeah. They have been sitting there every day. No, why is it that with this bill today, there is this kind of deployment?
Parliament, those are the MPs. Returning to the studio, the discussion, of course, is one that hinges on the role of the military in any one country's political processes, including the entrenchment of democracy. And with me in the studio is Dr. Tolit Atiya. He is a scholar and a security analyst, and a usual commentator with us here on Morning at NTV. Today we are also joined by the Honourable Member of Parliament for Kashari North, the Honourable Basil Bataringaya. I would like to begin this particular segment in reaction to what the Honourable Lutamaguzi has been sharing with us. Let me put that to you. What do you make of the call that he has issued to National Resistance Movement members of Parliament to legislate but also vote within the interest of the people and not necessarily what the party could be pushing?
Very correct. We are members of Parliament, and our call, our duty is to legislate in the interests of the people that have sent us. But at the same time, we are in a multi-party dispensation, and therefore the position of a party matters. So there are two things to balance. You as a member of Parliament, you are discussing on behalf of the people, but also the party has got a position, and therefore you must use your own judgment to balance both. My co-discussant this morning is in the security field. An expert in
maybe before you go to that other submission on security and other aspects, let me keep you on the fact that you are grappling with the people's interests and your party position. At what point should your own conscience be the overriding factor?
No, it's a matter of balancing both. When my party gives me a position, which is it correct or not? So if my conscience tells me it is not, that is why from the caucus we go to debate. And when we go to debate, it is not generally a consensus that what the party told us is what we shall present on the floor of Parliament. For example,
no, the vote is what matters, not necessarily the debate. It's the vote that matters.
It is the vote that matters. But I've also put it.
You could debate and show the country that maybe you have disagreements or concerns that may not align with the party, but when it comes to the voting, you still vote despite your realization and conviction that things don't align.
Have you ever heard on the floor of Parliament when the voices have said nay, and the presiding officer says the ayes have it.
You be very specific.
All the nays
Say
have
the
it.
Speaker or Deputy Speaker?
No, yes, that's
because
the
those are the two
presiding
presiding officers.
Yes, those are the presiding officers.
When you say nay and they say aye, have it.
So, but it is within the laws that you can now bring, you can stand up, and then when you are more than a given number, then there is an issue of counting and what have you. There are procedures. But usually, these things pass without. So, it is...
Without what?
It can pass even when you have objected. That's what I'm trying to tell you. However, what is important to the society is when you are on the floor of parliament, how have you presented yourself? So I don't subscribe to going there and follow sheepishly in parliament. The party has a position, and during a caucus, there is a debate. And the debate, the people present their views. So, as I've told you today, if you what we discussed is there discipline? No. For example, take the police now. The police is less disciplined than the UPDF because largely their cases are civilian handled. I was taking you to the security side.
Wow.
This is a security expert.
He will also help us on that conviction you just shared.
Do you know that Uganda has traded on that discipline in the army? It is the one that has carried us for those 40 years that the NRM has been in charge and actually is exporting.
But that is the nature of the army, a national army.
And is exporting
to be disciplined.
Yes, and is exporting security to other areas, to pacify other areas that surround us. It is what has helped. And therefore, to have amendments that entrench discipline, to me, it is paramount.
Discipline that violates the rights of the people at a certain extent.
No, not that violates. If you voluntarily go for the gun, you'll be tried by the relevant court.
Don't you think?
However, remember, I have said during the break that we have the best laws. Parliament does its job very well, despite the pulling of ropes. We do our job very well. We have some of the best laws in the continent, and people come here to benchmark.
To benchmark on our laws.
However, implementers of these laws are the ones that sometimes cause problems, and that's why amendments keep coming in.
No, why would you need amendments when you've already identified the problem as in a lack of execution and implementation? Shouldn't the NRM government and anyone NRM MP be hell-bent on ensuring that we work towards streamlining aspects of implementation of these laws than necessarily seeking to amend? And this brings me to a question I want you to answer. My apologies, Dr. Atiya. You might think I'm giving a lot of time to the Honorable. When the Supreme Court rules, and that ruling is straight away contested by the top guns in government, it creates a different precedent, and one that doesn't augur well for the entrenchment of democracy. That even when the judges or the courts of law have come up with a certain standard and stated their stand on an issue, somebody out there is going to overturn it by any means possible. Haven't we created the wrong precedent?
Now, I want to answer you from two aspects. One, the executive is the top organ and responsible for all the security in this country. If a decision by court is seen as, although the judiciary should be independent, but if the executive sees that this decision might endanger the security of this country, the executive should not relax and therefore take action.
Doctor, use 1 minute or two, wrap this conversation up for us. I allowed time to Honorable Bataringaya because of his good offices today.
Okay, I'll just very quickly point out, I just want to make two clarifications. One, we talked about Uganda's current security posture and what is on top of Uganda's security agenda. And I think in some of these things, you need to look at indicators. The best indicator here is, if you looked at the last 3 Uganda police crime reports, what seems to be rearing its head much more seriously, apparently, is actually cybercrime. What seems to be imminent is that we are moving away from what you call hard power, hardware, to soft power. Crimes are being orchestrated and conducted in the ICT framework and interspace. It would be my expectation that a Minister of Defense or an army or a government that is up to its task should be reading into these indicators and they are fortifying itself. Now, very, very quickly, for you to be able to do that, then you should be doing legislation, you should be passing policies that speak to that.
Yes.
Modern armies have actually now created brigades.
All right.
Created brigades of ICT.
Doctor,
we are now introducing a special force.
Okay, Dr.
Quite a contradiction.
No, Dr. Tolit Atiya, the contradictions are many, and of course, Morning at 10 TV cannot straighten out everything. I'm glad you've made time for this discussion this morning. Many thanks, Honorable Basil Bataringaya, MP Kashari North, for making time. That will do it for the Kickstarter, but do stay with us. We have another conversation on aspects that you should never miss. Meteorology and how you should understand the workings of nature. Stay with us. We'll be right back.